So how was that? That was pretty. Okay. So what we're going to do is we have Akiva back, and we have Tom Holland here, and we have a number of their cohorts. So I guess I will introduce them, and then we'll have a bit of a chat between myself and Akiva and Tom Holland, and then we will work everyone else into the conversation. So here we have Tom Holland, who in addition to being the star, is also an exec producer. And this was quite an accomplishment.
I
don't know. What do you want?
I'll let Akiva go next.
All right, right here. And then we have Akiva Goldsman. You probably saw him in the camera there at the end. Very nice job. We have Jodi, Domanic, the script supervisor. We have Loren Weeks, the production designer. We have Christopher Rand, the editor. We have Leslie Chung, the visual effects supervisor. We have Kaufman, the casting director. And Sue Jacobs, the music supervisor. Got ourselves a crowded room here. See what I did?
Someone was going to say it. I feel like I'm breaking the rules being here. This feels really odd. Hey, everyone.
So you remember how this works, right? Because I know you haven't promoted anything for a good long time because of the strike. But
Right.
I'll ask you some questions. You just answer the
I'm really fucking nervous. Thank you.
So now, Akiva, I mentioned this to you before. Akiva wrote A Beautiful Mind. He won the Oscar for that. And I thought that movie was brilliant. We see this guy, John Nash, he's deciphering these Soviet-planted media messages for the Defense Department. We think he's a genius, and then we learn that this is really a byproduct of his schizophrenia. Now, in the crowded room, you have to hide the diagnosis in the narrative about Danny Sullivan's fractured mind and multiple alter egos until late in the 10-episode series. Talk a little bit about the complexity of keeping the cards close to the vest for that long.
Only if I can have a microphone.
I'm gonna give you mine.
Did I steal your
You know, the writer.
project?
Thank you, Mike. But there are different structures. I think in Beautiful Mind it was very much sort of hermetic. We didn't want anybody to know ever. It was really supposed to be a kind of shocking reversal. This, I think, was different in that what we wanted to do was keep the audience as close to the character Tom played, as close to Danny as we could, and we weren't so interested in keeping it from you. If it's sort of really there, even at the very beginning, we were keeping it from Danny, and so your experience hopefully was closest to Danny's in that it took you some time to begin to catch on, and then some more time for the penny to drop. But it wasn't a piece of math in the way The Beautiful Mind was, which was more manipulative of the audience, I say proudly. This was more an echo of the performance at the center of the object.
Give me back that mic.
Take it.
So Tom, now you, this was a really interesting thing for you. This was your first big television experience. So you spent 120 days, and usually you end up with a 2-hour movie. Here you ended up with 10 hours. What was the challenge for you in pacing yourself and slowly peeling away Danny's layers until we get down to the pain brought on by trauma that he experienced as a child, which everyone kind of got a glimpse of. Give a sense as to how do you do that, and how much of a shake-up to the system was that in having all that time as an actor to dig deep into that character?
Well, it was definitely a daily struggle. It was something that, you know, we all carried that weight in some regard. I leaned on a lot of people. I was lucky that I had a great support system around me to kind of help me through that process. I think the thing that helped set up the show in the best way for me as an actor was the prep that Akiva and I had done together, which was, you know, I really came on to this project before you'd really written anything. It was really just an idea. And I was really excited about the fact that the idea didn't seem possible at the time. It seemed like a huge undertaking. I've always been someone that welcomes challenge and welcomes something that scares me. I was really lucky that Akiva was so open in sharing the responsibility of telling this story and making people feel heard who have been through the horrifics that this show kind of talks about. So I guess from a point of view of how difficult it was, I think I really understood the responsibility that was on all of our shoulders to bring this to life, and that far outweighed the challenges.
Well, this is not a common affliction. Can you give us an idea as to, I mean, just as the jury went through it in the trial, it's a lot to buy into. What kind of research and maybe talking to certain people grounded it for you so that you could convincingly play all these characters you played?
Well, the research was very extensive, far more extensive than anything I've done before. Obviously, it always starts with the literature. We had the book, which was fantastic. And I remember Akiva and I had a very heated conversation once where he basically said, you have to let the book go. We're not making the book. But that, for me, was a great source of information. Akiva was also fantastic. You have a huge, experience in psychology and all that sort of stuff. We spoke to psychiatrists, I spoke to friends and family that have been suffering from all sorts of different ailments throughout their life. So it was really just about connecting with people and understanding how powerful the human mind is and how incredible it is, and these security blankets that we can pull over that sometimes we don't know that we're doing. And then in terms of playing all of the different characters, I had an amazing acting coach, Ben Perkins, who I've worked with since The Impossible, since I was a kid. He really helped me navigate the multiple and ever-changing arcs of the characters. Some of the characters have got big blackout spots where they have stopped to exist for 6 months at a time. And figuring out whether or not do they progress in that 6 months, do they freeze in time and come out of that kind of dark period and just carry on as if nothing had happened. It was, conversations we'd had, but Ben was great. And it was just about committing. For me, it was just about knowing that what I was trying to achieve was kind of terrifying. And I just knew that I just wanted to do the best job I could. And every time I was doing something that I felt uncomfortable with, I just said to myself, you have to commit or no one will believe you.
Now, Akiva, how did you help him?
I watched. Tom is kind of a co-author of this creation. We sort of dug into this idea that multiple personality disorder wouldn't be used as a kind of freak show. It's often objectified. A lot of the times you see extreme, what used to be called psychiatric illnesses, but things that are non-neurotypical as sort of things, people that are other, right? So we were trying to create a generator for empathy, and in order to do that, what was most important was the humanity of the character Tom played, and then the humanity of the alters. And Tom had to then be that, all things for all people. So my job, more than anything, was probably some version, and not much of it, of a collective memory in terms of where we were, in terms of the narrative. And sometimes we would shoot out of sequence, and you know, and so you
Sometimes.
sort of, yeah, we never shot out of sequence, not once. And you know, Tom has this extraordinary ability to bring you close. And that was really all our guides. We were there to kind of go, oh, well, maybe, but fundamentally it was always off of what he was doing, you know, which is unique in any circumstance. And I'm old, so, you know, I've been lucky enough to be around a bunch of folks who do this for a living. He's unparalleled. This kid can do anything. It's terrible. So the truth is, we watched.
Well, now, and Tom, when this first came out, you talked a bit about the toll of diving into such a tortured character and playing all these characters inside of his fractured head. And I wonder, you know, how did you finally shake it off, and what sort of a toll does it take on an actor to take on a character that is just so I won't say tragic, because there was still empathy and likability there, but give a sense as to what that means. What kind of a toll does it take on you, and how'd you get rid of it?
It really does take a toll. I mean, as everyone in here will know, TV it takes a lot longer than a film, and I've never done it before. I'm used to 3 months and I'm done and move on. I'm also used to playing a superhero. It's a very different, you know, thing. I'm talking about Thanos and spaceships and all that kind of stuff. And you go home and, you know, nothing really changes. But like I said before, the responsibility of telling this story and to educate people on what it is that Danny is going through, which lots of people have gone through, was so important. There was a time I did at one point ask for a week off, and I was really lucky to get it, because I just really needed some time to reset before we went into the latter part of the show, so I could really hit the ground running and do arguably some of the most difficult stuff I've ever done, and I think I ever will do in terms of performance. But the toll was great. I had obviously that crazy haircut, which was I mean, you laugh, and yes, it's funny, but I would wake up in the morning and go to brush my teeth to get ready for work and be like, Jesus, whoa, oh my God. And I really struggled. I had times where I really struggled to shake it. I would dream as Danny. I would be on set as Danny. I would sometimes react to certain things in ways that he would and I wouldn't, and that's why I was lucky to have, you know, people like Jodi and Akiva and Ben to be there to kind of pick me up when those moments of weakness came out. But all in all, it was a very fulfilling experience. I learned so much about myself, my capabilities, who I am as a person from playing so many different people. So it was a real joy. It was a tough joy. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it was really eye-opening for me.
Well, Akiva, we did an interview that we talked today, and I called it Brave, where basically you discussed that, like Danny Sullivan, you'd been a victim of molestation by an adult when you were a young man, and this adult was a friend of your parents and had the trust of your family. And I wonder, first of all, how much did that inform what we saw in these 2 episodes and in the other 8? And how are you feeling now about having been honest about this terrible trauma?
Well, the show is very much a sort of, it's a synthesis of my life and of Billy Milligan's. I have often tried to smuggle my own experience into other people's stories. It's safer. And childhood sexual abuse is terrible. And it's something we don't talk about. And it's something that we carry around and that we are aware of every second of every day. But it's a secret. And, secrets are really toxic. So this opportunity to make a show that said we all suffer somehow from some sort of loss, some more traumatic than others, was really important to me. And I sort of said to myself, if I'm going to do that, then I will also talk about this part of it. It's not something that I've kept secret. It's just not something I typically go, you know, and hi, how are you? Let's have a drink. And also when I was a kid, I was abused. Actually, I did that a bunch in college. But you know, it's okay. You know, the point of this was to say, it's okay that we grow, we heal, we take loss and pain and trauma and we try to convert them into grace or meaning or art. And just that act is pretty redemptive. And even though one feels exposed, finally that exposure is healing. So the hope is that that energy put into an object touches other people and inspires them to tell their secrets, not feel shame, and do their own work of healing. That's our secret outcome goal.
Yeah. And give us a sense of how that worked and the kind of reactions you've gotten. After I did that piece, I got a bunch of emails and some people were talking about that you were courageous and brave. One person kind of dressed me down for basically saying, you know, it's like you re-traumatized the victim, which obviously I didn't mean to do, and if I did, I apologize. But give a sense as to, I'm sure that you already feel like you reach somebody who maybe is at a younger stage who needs to be reached and who needs to understand that this is not their fault.
Well, Tom and I have talked about this a bunch, that there's this sort of extraordinary connection between this show and some people. It's like it speaks a language for certain people that they wanted to speak, or that it slakes a thirst for communication or connection they needed slaked. And I was joking about college, but the truth is what happens, and there's some of this is in the writing of the piece, survivors of sexual abuse signal other survivors of sexual abuse. We don't know we're doing it, but we're doing it. We have our own ability to sort of clock it, and sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's unconscious. But there are different subsets of people in the world, and we speak differently to each other. There are cultures within cultures, and those of us who are traumatized often are not recognized except by each other. So this was a way of saying, hey, we see you, you see us, it's okay. And that has been very compelling, I think, in the sort of the, what do you call it, the World Wide Web?
We call it.
You know, that we've gotten a lot of anecdotal, very inspiring testimonials about what the show did for them. I mean, you've heard a bunch of them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, you always hope as an artist that when you release something that it's more than entertainment. It's a love note. It's a reaching hand. It's a helping hand. And we were both really overwhelmed by the amount of people that were so grateful for what you had written, for the idea that they felt seen, that they felt like we were holding out a hand to say that, you know, we see you. And for me, it was, you know, one of the most rewarding parts of my career to be a part of something that has touched so many people in a way that very few pieces of art can. And, you know, that's a testament to Akiva's writing and his skill as someone to steer the ship. And Jodi.
No.
So yeah, it was an amazing few weeks when all of those tweets were coming out and we were seeing, you know, the community that we were building.
I love that. That was very eloquent, and I can see you're gonna fall right back into that actor promoting, a project which we've been lusting for quite some time. So good for you. Good on you. Now you mentioned Jodi. Jodi, I got a question for you. You're the script supervisor. What was the first note that you gave Akiva that sort of was a bit of a game changer?
Well, it was pretty infamous in that I had not met Akiva. I actually interviewed with Cornell, one of our directors, and Cornell hired me. So my first meeting with Akiva was on Zoom during a meeting, and the first thing that I said to him was, as a former clinical psychologist, I don't think that Danny, in his first session with Raya, would talk about Adam's sexual abuse. And Akiva said,
Can I fire
I thought that might have been it for me.
That's what you said.
No, I said it behind her back. Of course. To the person who had hired.
You said it without having a microphone.
Yeah, they always didn't have that much gusto.
But it planted something in you. Explain how this changed the structure.
Well, Jodi was right. Oh God, it's like pulling pins through my cheeks. Jodi was right. Oh, I can't even. Yeah.
Jodi was right.
Oh God, that's what it sounds like when you say it. Yeah. And we did. We restructured. By the end of the show, we had rebuilt it so that it was actually the last thing he said in his arc of therapy is not the first. And so that turns out that collaborative art is really a thing. Listen to each other, as painful as it may be.
Wow. Sounds like you need more therapy.
Just not enough.
Now, so Loren, our production designer, talk about how the crowded room became this sort of surreal barn, and why you set it up that way and what you were going for. It was quite something.
Yeah, that set had a very long, arduous journey, from what was originally scripted to then multiple ideas that were presented, some very esoteric, and it seemed like we couldn't ever agree on what it should be, which, understandably, it's a huge, important piece of scenery for what at that time originally scripted was the entire episode. And I think actually, Tom, you came up with the suggestion of the barn, right?
No, it was actually my brother.
And
Yeah.
and it just, I think everyone just was like, whoa, yeah.
Yeah.
And once the barn was, that was the course we were going to take, then the design for it, of course, started to just kind of flow for me, I think. And the idea was to anchor it in reality, so it felt believable when you're there in the sort of tighter scenes, but to also give it a feeling of infinite scale, which for me was trying to suggest that, it's the infinite capacity of the human mind, of what it can create, and where the sort of various layers that, anyway, I'm getting lost in there. It's the infinite capacity of the mind. And so that's why it was so huge initially when you stand on the precipice and you look down. And then the spotlight aspect of it came from the book. That's how the alternate or the other identities in the real story described how they took possession of the body. That it was a spotlight on a stage, and they would walk into it and they would take possession. And then the other aspect that we pursued on there was as Danny kind of went further into the barn set, he went deeper into the bowels, it became this sort of flooded area. And this is where the identities that no longer were required or exile to. So that was kind of the history of the progress of that set.
Well, now, the people here, they saw these 2 episodes, but I took it to they probably don't realize that the barn was sort of a replica of where Danny was molested. Is that
That's
that
right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
why it
that
made
was
so
sort of,
much
that
sense.
was the significance of the,
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
of having that. It was very effective. And you know, so for Chris and Leslie, episode 1 became episode 5. What went into that decision, and why was that important? Because there's a lot of concealment, necessary concealment. When Akiva first came up here, he talked about how there was a number of things. It was a procedural, it was a thriller, it was numerous things. But I guess if you give away all the secrets right up front, maybe it isn't that. Give a sense as to how that evolved and how episode 1 became episode 5 and vice versa.
Yeah, it was episode 1, and then it became episode 4, and then 5, which was a whole process unto itself. And yeah, you know, as we touched on with Jodi, I think it was really, we needed to learn about and love Danny before we saw this trauma, and you know, sort of having this idea of everything underlying rather than already knowing what's there. You know, and just fundamentally, the pilot is more fun now. It's like a couple of guys go out and they chase a girl and they chase drugs and some bad stuff happens and then the story launches, versus beginning your show with something really heavy that can, you know, be kind of not a red flag, but just something that tells people it's going to be a really hard show from the get. And yeah, I think this really helped us establish Danny as someone to love and someone, you know, just a world of his own that we could live in, and particularly to do that through Tom, and then meet, you know, the younger Danny later on is really important.
And Leslie, so you're the visual effects supervisor, and we know you've done a whole bunch of Star Treks, and give a sense as to sort of the opportunity that you saw here.
I mean, I think at a first glance, the opportunity here ended up being far more fulfilling than I thought it would be. On paper, you know, Star Trek seems like just any VFX nerd or any nerd's dream. You know, there's a lot of very flashy VFX there to really enjoy and really just get intensely creative with. And I think coming into this show, I had, after 5 seasons of Star Trek, had kind of underestimated how artistic this show would become. And part of that was just also being able to really support a puzzle piece story that, in a way, was like the story in and of itself. You know, it was a crowded room that was a puzzle for Danny and the characters to unwind, but for us too, in once we got into post, creating visual effects that was meant to be beautiful and support the story and maintain the kind of tone of Danny's innocence, Danny's journey, and representing that in just the fireflies that we had, you know, to just beautifully like embrace his character, and then the barn to also show that same mirrored effect while also, I think, honoring the trauma and the healing factor from it was, I think, the first time for me really being able to create gentle VFX that felt like the tone of the story. And in the building of different episodes to be in a different part of the entire story arc, it was just incredibly creative and fun and challenging to work with Akiva and the editors and Chris to figure out what we had shot, what we could create in post, and then also make sure it was on time and on budget.
Now, Avi, you cast everyone. There's a mix of fresh faces. I'm watching it and I say, yeah, that's Jason Isaacs. He's great. And there's the guy from Fauda. I mean, and then there were a lot of people I'd never seen before. Can you give a sense as to what you were going for, what your priority was in the people that you cast for the main roles and also the alters?
And actors needed to be able to keep up with Tom. You know, they all had a responsibility. They could act opposite Tom and do a great job. Every scene, I have to go back with the respect for Akiva and how important this story is for the world, for every human being, for whatever you go through. You know, we all have the ups and downs, and this is a very important script. So all the actors had to keep up with Tom, whether it be Amanda or Leor, and so a lot of the friends in the beginning with Tom, first time actors, because they were all simple. They were enjoying life. And then you get into the heaviness of it, and then you need stronger actors to present that. And so you need to follow the rhythm of who can bring out those words and keep up with Tom and express these situations as heavy as they were.
Well now, and Sue, as our music supervisor, you got some great songs, and I watched every episode, and you know, Bill Withers' song, A Lovely Day, and there at the end, the epitaph, Let It Be. How hard is it to get Let It Be? How'd you do that?
Let It Be, it wasn't difficult. It was a journey, because Akiva was really clear of, you know, that was the first conversation that we had, was Let It Be. You know, it was in their script. Everybody said, well, we're not going to get that, so we're not going to move on. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I think we're going to go for it. And that's the way I feel about all the, you know, the only person that can say no is the artists or the representatives. I've never ever turned away because someone said you can't get Led Zeppelin or you can't. No, I never worked that way. So it was really, I understood why it was so important to Akiva, and this song was really important. It represented his own childhood and a song that saved him. And that made it so powerful for me to make sure that I could go and bring this in. I have a great relationship with the Beatles, but it was hard because it was dark. That was the hardest thing, because there's a board. It's not just, you know, it's a very dark show, and that was really, I had to bring people over and show them episodes. You know, it was a long process, but it was really, Akiva wrote one of the most beautiful letters. And I think that, you know, they came back and said, how can we not do that? And then we kept adding on other uses. So, but it ended up being really not about, you know, at some point it wasn't affordable, and they were like, we don't care. We really want to be part of this story. And I think the first thing that Akiva said was, I want to make a mental health story that's really positive. And I thought that was hugely important, that yeah, we can go through stuff, but this is not, it doesn't have to define you for the rest of your life. You actually can come out of, you know, something and reinvent and recreate yourself. And yeah, you're going to carry that pain, but you know, you're going to make a beautiful painting, or you're going to, you know, you can find things. And I think that's what made this story so important. And when I can express that with his beautiful words and writing that he wrote a beautiful letter, that's great.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to end this. I want to thank our panelists here, and I want to thank you all for taking part.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.